I'm really excited today because I'm interviewing in this episode Jonathan Meisner, who's the Senior Director for Digital Experiences at Life.Church in Oklahoma City. As you probably know, Life.Church is the largest church in the country. They have about 37 campuses, literally all over the country. And they do a remarkable thing. They created the Church Online program that helps so many churches through this live streaming experience during the pandemic. They've been pioneers in all kind of remarkable digital things. They created the YouVersion Bible app, for instance. So I love the team there. I've been friends with Bobby Grunwald, who leads the digital team. I've been friends with Craig Groeschel, the pastor. And these are great, great people. And so today we're going to talk about opening your mind up to what's possible in the digital realm. I'm thrilled to have Jonathan Meisner, who's the Senior Director for Digital Experiences at Life.Church today. Jonathan, it's great to see you. Great to finally have you on the podcast.
Phil, thank you so much for having me. When I got the ask, it was like a no-brainer, easy yes. So I appreciate it, man.
Well, that's very kind. So let's start with your title, Senior Director, Digital Experiences at Life.Church. Explain to us what that means exactly.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping you could actually do that for me. It's a lot of words, but as practically as I can make it, it's really important. I would say it this way: trust with any organization is really important. It's the foundation of any relationship, really. And so that trust that we try to create in our physical spaces and our physical churches, when people walk in the door, very disarming. We want that same feeling. We want that same posture to be felt anywhere someone might interact with us in the digital space. Whether primarily that will likely happen in some of our online services, but that does spill over into social media, some of the things we do on websites or landing pages. And so really the burden that's on my heart is just to make sure that someone that interacts with Life.Church has that same feeling, that same, they just feel cared for lack of better terms, from our church. And what we believe is that through that trusted relationship, the message of the gospel will reach them in a really significant way.
Now, you have a term called the hybrid church mentality. Explain what that means exactly.
Well, it's no secret 2020 was a weird year. And
true.
Yeah. And so while we've been doing online church for many years, really since 2006, everybody sort of had this obviously heightened awareness of how do we build community out of necessity as people are almost sort of forced to be isolated or separated from each other. And as we sort of enter back into some form of a new normal, we're recognizing now more than ever that the separation really between people that might attend Life.Church in a physical world or those that might interact with Life.Church in the digital space really isn't separate anymore. It's the same people like you and I. It's very common. There's a good example might be like, if I live here in Oklahoma City, so I'm a big fan of the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I love going to Thunder games. I love being there, part of the experience, but just as much as I love being there, I also love watching them on TV. And that is kind of a hybrid mentality. If you think about it, the same people that interact with their favorite sports teams, whether it be in a physical space or in the digital space, we're finding now more than ever, people are sort of engaging with God, engaging with the church in a very similar way. So it's not physical or digital, it's hybrid. The same people are engaging with our church. They're engaging with the message of hope in both spaces.
So in many ways, you want that to be a seamless transition, whether they're there in the seat, live at the physical campus, or whether they're watching at home or on an iPhone, on a plane, or whatever they're doing. You want that kind of the environment, the feeling, the ethos, whatever, to be a very similar thing, right?
That you nailed it, man. It really comes down to that feeling. Well, I can't serve somebody coffee through a screen, as much as I want to take something and hand it to you through a screen, I can't do that. So there are differences. We've got to think about different things. I have the benefit of, if I'm on screen, I can move a camera wherever I want to. I can bring in the music and graphics and stuff that might be different in physical space. But it really comes down to that feeling. Are they feeling like they're hearing a common voice?
Yeah.
So that's what it comes down to.
It's funny. One of my great idols, film director John Huston, said many, many years ago that if the audience notices how great your shot is, you failed as a director because you've distracted them from the story. And I often feel like we're trying to be so cool, we're trying to be so hip with our online experiences that we're actually distracting people from the service. And our real goal through an online experience is to get people to just be a part of that service and not be distracted by the cool factor, by the equipment, by whatever. And I think that's you guys do a brilliant, brilliant job of that. And it's a good reminder for other people.
Oh, thank you so much. I've spent a lot of my time behind a camera and understanding just the significance that everything that goes into crafting a good story or a great experience. And really, I mean, you feel it even in physical experiences. Like, I think sound guys would say the same thing. Yeah. You're a good sound guy if no one notices that you're there. The sound goes well, you did your job right. And we do try. You hit the nail on the head. We want to enhance the experience, but we don't want to make it about the show, for lack of better terms, or about it's about the message, it's about the story. And we want to do that in a captivating way that keeps your attention. Yeah. But we don't want the lights or the cameras or anything to be like, oh man, I wonder how they did that and all that stuff. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head, man.
So you mentioned storytelling. You actually started at Life.Church. Your title was storyteller, right?
That's it, man. I came into the church in 2010 with a new job, and it's very similar to like the job title you described to me now. They said, we'd love for you to be the storyteller. And I was like, okay, what does that look like? And really, I spent the better part of my tenure here at Life.Church as the storyteller, serving as sort of the one that was advocating for great storytelling within the church in a practical way that looked very similar to what you would encounter in the real world as a news reporter. So a lot of time spent behind the camera in the editing bay, interviewing people, but also sometimes I'd be on camera sharing the story like you'd expect any news reporter to be in the field at different locations, different ministry outlets that we have. And so stories, I mean, they're ingrained in my heart. I do believe it's what connects people and what really helps a message land deep in someone's heart is great story. And so spent the better part of my time here doing that, and still try to incorporate that into all of our experiences. Good word for the video people out there. That's a great way to start. I've said very often that short videos are the number one marketing tool in America. They take up more internet bandwidth these days of anything short of Amazon Prime and Netflix. More companies, nonprofits. One of our clients is the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. And in the 3.5 years leading up to their opening, we probably did 300 short videos on marketing and membership and awareness and all kind of fundraising, all kind of things. And so I just think churches need to take advantage of that. You guys, I've seen you show short videos during services, during your live stream, on social media. You just incorporate short videos. And it's mostly about life change, right? About people whose lives have been transformed because of the church or because of Craig's message. They're fantastic stories. And you've really maximized how you use those. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, thank you. There's our senior pastor, Craig Groeschel, recently in one of his podcasts talked about the difference between inspiration and motivation, and how we as leaders can sometimes use those terms interchangeably, but they're really not. The way I've kind of described it, it may not be in Craig's words exactly, but how it resonated with me is motivation is a little bit more of that coach when you're in the moment of just keep guiding and doing that. And while we absolutely do that with those that come into our church and helping them take next steps, the best thing though is when we are able to inspire them, and that desire for change comes from deep within. And that's honestly, if you lead a team if you're able to inspire your team, you're likely moving them in the right direction. The same thing we want to do with our churches. We want to inspire the individual to take those next steps in their faith. Story just happens to be a really powerful way to do that. You see somebody that's taken that step and they have something that I want. And that's the inspirational piece that comes down to it. And so stories are huge.
Now, going back to your hybrid experience, your hybrid model, your hybrid concept, it's also true of your campuses. How many campuses does Life.Church have as of today?
Yeah, so we've got 36 locations in a variety of states across the U.S. And then, obviously then our global impact comes through the online ministry. But as of today, whenever we're recording, 36.
Well, it's interesting to me that in those spaces, you're not just, buying random buildings that all look different and or have different design. You're making, for at least the most part, you're trying to make everyone a Life Church experience. So they look similar. The branding, if you will, goes through the architecture, the design, the style of the inside. That's another way that it's one thing to slap your logo on different things, but the truth is you want to make the whole experience reflective of who you are and what you're all about, and you seem to do a great job with that. Is that an important issue with the campuses?
I think it's extremely important and extremely intentional too. And it goes back to sort of what I mentioned earlier. It comes down to trust. We understand that in the hybrid mentality in some of our cities where we have locations, there's multiple locations. And I know my family and there are times that we may not be at the location that we primarily attend. We might find ourselves at a different location. And the same is true for a lot of people that live in those cities. And we want to create, again, a sense of trust. No matter where you experience Life Church, you're experiencing something you can expect that's very intentional, that's meant to sort of disarm you a little bit,
Yeah.
and make you feel welcomed. And if we're able to do that right in one place, let's do it right in another place. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
no matter where they experience it, even if somebody does experience it just in one location or just online, it really comes down to, we want to be somebody that you can trust,
Yeah.
because we know somebody that we want you to trust.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And there's three things I admire about Life Church. Let me just throw in here while we're talking about this is number one is creativity. You guys are wildly creative and very open to creativity, and you understand the power of creativity. But number two, you're brilliant at designing systems. I mean, you've come up with brilliant systems that work. And then the third thing would be you have the discipline to stick with those systems. It's so funny. I know church leaders, pastors, creative people that are brilliant coming up with ideas and very creative, but they're switching gears almost every week. Every time they come up with a new idea, they drop what they're doing and let's focus on that. Now let's drop that and focus on this. And they don't stick with anything long enough to make it work. But you guys are remarkably disciplined about, okay, we figured this out. We're going to really follow this through. I've been on vacation with both Craig and Bobby Grunewald. And those are the most disciplined guys I ever met. We could be in a tropical location somewhere, and they're going to get up and work out in the morning. They're insane. And I so respect that kind of discipline, and they carry it through with everything you do at the church. And so setting systems in place that really work, I think, is a real strength of the church. I mean, you're obviously involved in that on a regular basis. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, and I think you testify to it really well, is our leadership really sets the pace and models it really well, not just in their personal life, but through our values. We say that consistency over time is what yields results. And sometimes in your life, it could be consistency and bad things will yield a bad result. But what we really do try to focus on are creating systems that, having the end goal in mind, is really going to serve us well. And we know when we believe, whenever you try something new, it's rare that you're going to see like, whoop, real quick exponential increase. It may be closer to a slow burn.
Yeah.
But if God's given us a vision, if we sense God moving in some place, we're willing to put the right systems in place. And I say willing, it's really a testament to our leadership that's willing to follow the Spirit's prompting and say, oh, we're going to lean into this and believe that something is going to come from it. We'll build systems around it.
Yeah.
And even I would even say more than just the systems, because we have to allow systems to adapt and change. The thing that is always consistent are those values, and holding true to those values. Those really are our North Star. And so we're building things around, how do we embody those values?
All right, so let's talk about some practical things now for a minute. Let's talk about the live stream, for instance. When the church shutdown happened in 2020 because of the pandemic, did you have to shift anything? I mean, you were pretty much already in the zone when it comes to a live stream. You guys, like you say, you've been doing it for so long. I know a lot of churches were caught completely off guard, but did you change anything? Did you adapt anything? Did you adjust anything? Did you need to during that time?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the answer is absolutely we did. We do stream from a physical location,
Yeah.
and for the most part, were able to show people in the room. And, from a real practical standpoint, we no longer had people in the room, just like
Yeah.
everybody else did. And so there's even some constraints that brought into how we visually tell our story, whether it be how Pastor Craig preaches. He just at times would embrace the fact the room's empty, but we're able to still engage in your homes, in your
Yeah.
with your families, wherever you're at. And so there was some language tweaks that took place. Our worship experiences looked different because we didn't have a crowd that we were building off of. So worship became a little bit more intimate, which honestly, it was a really engaging piece. And so there were things about that changed. But from an infrastructure standpoint, there may have been some tweaks, but not a lot of change. We were fortunate enough to, several years ago, follow God's leading and sort of the burden that He put on our leadership's heart to engage the online audience, that we felt really adequately prepared. And more than anything, we then had our burden for other churches happened to grow. And so where we really focused a lot of time, a lot of resource, a lot of staff just completely pivoted and went all hands on deck, was how do we resource other churches to do this well? Because we felt fortunate, we felt blessed that God has positioned us to be able to minister in such a time. We were super passionate and very on fire of how do we help other churches do the same thing to not only survive, but thrive during this time.
That's good. Now, a lot of churches, it's funny, when the pandemic happened, a lot of churches, when the shutdown, I should say, happened, a lot of churches started coming in on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday and shooting the live stream and airing it. It's funny, half the churches we work with love the rush of being live. They want to do it live because it's a great rush. Others are nervous about having a light problem or a camera problem or an internet problem. So they'd rather pre-tape and do it that way. But now that we're back in the building and now that things are normal again, you seem to have created a hybrid system where some of the elements you do are live, some of the elements are pre-taped, and then they're put together and you air them in different ways. I'd like you to just help churches understand it's okay to still do some pre-taped things. It's okay to still be live. It's not either or, it's kind of both and. I think to maximize the live stream, you can bring in elements from both, right?
For sure. I think you hit the nail on the head again, is there's really not a cookie cutter way to do it. We definitely have elements that are pre-produced. I mean, you can get down to even just promo videos are pre-produced.
Right.
There's a few, we may have some other elements of talking heads that are pre-produced. They're able to drop in. But the reality is whether or not you go full on live or whether or not you go pre-produced, it all comes back to authenticity and connection. Again, I'm going to keep beating this drum.
That's good.
Of trust. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and authenticity, vulnerability is really what another element that creates that trust. So whether or not you pre-produce or whether you go full on live, building that sense of authenticity and vulnerability is great. Our senior pastor Craig does a phenomenal job, regardless if he's pre-recorded or live, of just laying it all out on the table. And I think that's really a big reason why people connect with them. And so we try to do that in all of our areas. Is just how do we build that trust through vulnerability? How do we establish trust for an ongoing relationship?
And I don't know, maybe you've seen evidence, but during the whole shutdown and pandemic period, I never saw any evidence that it makes a difference as far as response is concerned. People don't know if you're live. They don't know if you're not live. The only thing I tell people sometimes is I like a live stream to be a little rough around the edges because, like you say, you want it to be authentic. You want it to be real. And sometimes I've seen a few that are so polished, so edited, they look like a television show, and it just doesn't come across as a worship experience, which I think is really critical.
Yeah, it's authentic. And the reality is, I mean, for our online services, we have so many that go on throughout the week that, I'll be honest, I mean, if you're tuning in on a Thursday at 1 p.m., I think those pretty consistent attenders at our online experience know that they're watching a message that happened a few days ago. But we are very intentional at every service. It truly is live because we have volunteers that are there in the chat. We've got live prayer that's going to connect you to a real person in real time that's able to pray with you in the moment. It truly is live. And so while the content that someone may be consuming or listening to or watching it may not be actually live. What is
Right.
live is the personal connection.
For those that are skeptical about chat rooms on their live stream, what would you say about chat rooms? Have you seen positive response from them, negative response? What do you guys do?
I mean, we absolutely go all in on live chat and connection. It's really tough to do ministry without relationship. If all that we're doing is pumping content your way, you're not really attending, you're just watching. You know what I mean? And so we've got to be all in on relationships, and how do we allow our church to be the church and to meet people that have needs, as opposed to just giving them links or more videos to consume. That personal connection is incredibly important to us. And so we put a lot of time, a lot of energy in helping facilitate those personal connections. Does that mean everybody's welcome in the chat? Yeah, it kind of does. And you've got to navigate some stuff. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing at a church. Your doors are open for anybody. We'll take you just as you are, and we'll walk this path with you. And
if you get crazy, we'll throw you out. It's the same way.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we'll throw you out right away. We definitely want to walk alongside of you, but everybody's welcome.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So tell me a little bit about your team structure. It's, you're the senior director for digital experiences. However, and digital experience includes social media, includes the website, includes live stream, video, so many things, but you're not necessarily in charge of each of those things. You have groups, because it's such a big church. Let's face it, you're the largest church in America. So you've got a large team, and one person can't be responsible for everything. So the key thing is you've got to really work together, though, because your priorities have to be who's seeing what, who's live now, what are we doing now? How do y'all work together as a group?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And you're right that our structure probably looks different than a lot of other churches, even churches that might be our same size. Every organization has their own structure that makes sense for them. And so we've kind of landed in a place that works really well for us, but it requires a lot of intentional integration and collaboration. So a lot of face-to-face conversations, even if it's like, hey, I know you're not my boss, or I'm not your boss, or anything like that, but man, I really rely on you to help us get done, or you rely on me. And so how can I serve you? It's a lot of intentional collaboration, a lot of healthy relationship building, influencing rather than leading with authority. And it really is a full team effort. There's talent across our organization, and I love tapping into other teams' talent because they're unbelievable at what they do. And now just becomes a little bit more of, hey, here's the vision of where we're leading towards. Let's see how we can all work together to make it happen, and just keep talking to each other.
I think churches don't realize very often the power of chemistry. Just getting the right leaders together, I think is so critical. Who will talk to each other, who will, be humble about the way they approach things. It's not about building your kingdom over here in this area or this area. It's really about working together as a much bigger team. And you guys seem to do a really, really brilliant job of that. So, I'm so impressed with the way you guys do that. Let me ask you this. Volunteers. Now, there's a lot of myths about Life.Church. There's a lot of myths about, everybody, but I've been in meetings where people will say, well, Life.Church, they don't have volunteers. They pay everybody to run camera and do all kind of stuff on Sundays. Furtick does that over at Elevation. Joel does that down at Lakewood. Everybody's doing, paying people. But the truth is, you're really aggressive and really strong in developing volunteers and raising them up. Is that right?
It is. You'll hear a term real quick if you're around Life.Church, that we want everyone to be needed, and we want them to be known. And that means we want to know your name. But here's the reality: we need you. And it's not, and we don't just say it. We honestly need you to do it. We like to run lean as a staff and lean heavily on the church. We need our volunteers. We need the talent that God's brought us through his people to help us do ministry effectively. And so that does require a lot of time for us to train, to invest. but you're not going to hear that we just recruit volunteers. You're going to say we release leaders. We don't
great.
have volunteers. We've got volunteer leaders that are a part of our church that we're able to release authority to and allow them to lead and to build things, whether that be just from behind a camera, actually running that on the weekend, to leading life groups all over the world, whatever that is. We rely heavily on our church.
I love that phrase. We don't recruit volunteers, we release leaders. That's really, really, really great. And I can tell you from Elevation, from Lakewood, from a lot of other big churches in the country, it's remarkable. They're using very few paid people. They recruit an enormous volunteer army to do amazing things. And I've been in churches where we train camera operators who are now freelance camera people in that city. So it can be done, but it does, you're right, it has to be a real intentional effort. But it's like delegating. It's painful for a while, but once you get over that hump, man, it releases you. And people that won't do that, they're going to struggle for the rest of their career. So I think that's really, really important. Equipment is interesting too. We had a conversation recently about equipment. You guys, up until recently, you shoot Craig on Sundays with 3 cameras, and I think you just recently got a 4th. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, he's still shot on 3 primary cameras for his communication. And we've ran that play for years, honestly. And the reality is, it goes back to what you said. It's not about the show, it's about the message. And the 3 camera setup that we've got for Craig works flawlessly for his communication style and allowing us to create sort of an experience that it genuinely feels like Craig is talking to you. We hear that all the time, that people will say, I just feel like he was talking directly to me. Now, big part of that is because he does have people in mind that he's talking to as he's shaping a message, as he's communicating. So don't get me wrong, a lot of that is because of Craig's communication. We just try to complement it with cameras that enhance that communication he's bringing.
Now, hold on a second. This is worth repeating. You said you set up the cameras to complement Craig's preaching, teaching style and his personality. I know so many churches that they're trying to get the pastor to adapt to the way they want to shoot it. And that's the exact opposite, and so many guys will say, well, Pastor, if I just had that camera dolly, that'd solve everything. Or if I had this camera jib, it would solve everything. But you're telling me that it's not about the equipment, right?
It's not. Now, the equipment is a big thing of it, but it's not end all be all. This is my personal conviction when it comes to equipment, is like there genuinely are times, and I know if I'm getting off base with you, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
You're getting me on a soapbox right now, but there genuinely are times when the most effective camera is this one right here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The viral videos that are funny and connect with you are viral because they're authentic and they come from this camera. Now, we're not filming Craig on a phone to be authentic. What we are trying to do is we understand Craig's communication style. We understand him as a communicator, and all we're doing is complementing what he brings. And so our job, now we do have a job behind the cameras in creating an experience. We are honestly communicators ourselves, but we're not trying to be the main message. We're just trying to complement the message the main communicator is bringing. And so that's what we do.
That's good. Well, I come from a directing background, so the more cameras, the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. I'd love to shoot with everything with 12 cameras and, multiple jibs and dollies and stuff. However, I also know that you're exactly right. I mean, there's a time when at that close up, one of the things that drives me nuts is, people don't recognize the power of a simple close up. Yeah. That can just be so direct and so powerful and so compelling. So it's not, we want the best equipment we can afford and that works. But it's really not about the equipment. It's about how are we capturing that speaker and that teacher and that experience. That's a big thing in my book as well. I think that's so good. So let me ask you this: what are if I was to ask you, what are the most common mistakes you see out there among churches? What would you say? What do you think if you could tell church communicators and pastors and leaders, here's some of the things I see that I'd love for you to fix? What would those things be?
Sure. Well, in that question, and I'm not trying to flip it too much, but I do want to say that there's multiple ways to do it. We at Life.Church,
right.
One way that we've found seems to work well for us. And I'll be honest, we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, the world is so quickly changing and adapting that we've got to be pretty nimble and agile ourselves, and we'll try things and see and evaluate, did that land, did it fall flat? So I if I were to say, what's one of the myths or things they're doing wrong, I don't think there's a cookie cutter way to do it.
Good.
And so, but what I probably would encourage, I would take that posture. What I would encourage people to consider is, we do now live in a space where people are engaging with digital content quite a bit. And I do feel like we do have an obligation and a responsibility, is probably the better word, of how do we leverage that for ministry, for our message. And so that, without the full context of where that church is, maybe physically in the world, or knowing their personal community, knowing their audience, it's tough to put one cookie cutter thing in there. But I will say, just be okay embracing that mentality, leaning into it as leaders. When something comes up, investing time and resource into it. I think it's going to serve you really well, and it'd be interesting to see how God works through that.
And one pastor called me during the pandemic and say, "Man, I spent 6 months telling my congregation how awesome online worship is. Now that it's over, how am I ever going to get them back in the building?" Do you wrestle with that at all? Do you see, man, we'd still like to get the buildings full. We still like to get people coming back and fellowshipping and being together in community. But is that a debate you guys have, or is just the chips fall where they are?
No, I wouldn't say it's a debate at all. I work in the digital experience. That I'm the church has asked me, hey, we would love for you to help us steward our online experiences, but you got to know, I'm just as passionate about sharing stories at our physical locations. I'm not just sharing the stories or highlighting different things that are happening globally or through the digital space, although we do that. But when there's a win at a physical location, or when we launch a new location in a community, a new local church in a community, my word, I definitely want to celebrate that. If there is an increase in physical attendance, you know what? That's not only a win for that local church, it is a win for our global church as well. It does not matter. We definitely, if there's a local church in your community, we want you connected to it.
That's good.
We just know that there's going to be places that maybe there isn't, or there's a church or a message that you may not have quick access to, and we've got a digital space that we can help meet you in. But we always want people connected to the local church. That is the number one channel that God uses to move people to action, to draw others to Him, is the local church. And so we're all in on that. I work in the digital space, and I'm all in.
Now, what can you do in the digital space when they launch a new campus in a new city or a new town somewhere? Do you do prep work online to get the word out, or start conversations about it? Or is there a strategy you have for launching a church in a new facility when it comes to the digital world?
Yeah, and if I think outside of just our digital experience, like our digital services, where we're teaching and worship and all that stuff, that probably does expand into the digital space with marketing in social media, targeted emails, targeted advertisements, some of those things. The reality is we do leverage technology to help bring awareness to the church, to help support that local pastor, the local staff that's building that church there. And it's probably, again, I'm not trying to scoot out of practical answers. It is different for every community, every location. It's going to look different if we launch a new campus in a new city, in a new state that's the only one there, as opposed to if, our marketing and communication strategy will look different if we're launching, like, let's say, the 4th location in that city area. It's going to look different. But yes, we absolutely leverage online resources to help get the word out. And we will do that in our online services as well.
Let me ask you a couple quickie questions here before we go. And that is, your online hosts that are hosting the live stream, do you change those up regularly? Are they the same people all the time? What are your thoughts on that? Do you want to establish a relationship with those particular people, or do you switch them up? How does that work?
Yep. So we're going to go back to that feeling of trust. I definitely think having some level of consistency with your on-camera presence is a form of building trust. Now, we do have a variety. Right now, we've got 7 different communicators that will communicate in the digital space outside of Craig. Craig is our primary communicator. He's our pastor to the world. He is what we build the experiences around, his messages. And so, but we do have 7 other online communicators.
Great.
And we will utilize them in a variety of different spaces. So while you're not going to see all 7 every time, you are seeing one of them there every time. And the reason we do that is, we sort of recently brought this team on, and we just recognized we've got a really diverse, we have a very, that's the best word. We've got a really diverse audience that we're trying to speak to. We need to have a team of communicators that reflects that diversity. So there's diversity in age, in gender, in life experiences, in race, and all sorts of things that they bring a sense of diversity to, so that when somebody interacts with us in the digital space, our hope is that they see somebody that they connect with.
That's good. Well, in the old days, we used to say, if you have a diverse church, that needs to be reflected in the people we see on stage, the pastoral staff, the worship team, the music people. And now we kind of apply that to the digital world. If we're going to have hosts and other on-camera people, they should reflect the diversity of the church as well. So I think that's a really, really good point. Last couple questions. What about your playback? So you do the live stream on Sunday. You're playing it back all week. Do you play it at predetermined times, or can I just go online anytime I want and watch that week's service?
Yep. So you can watch messages on demand at our website, but for a live worship experience, those are at predetermined times, because we have, like I said, we've got sort of our army of volunteer leaders that are there to welcome you as hosts in the chat, to do live prayer. And so just like on a Sunday where you might have an 8:30, a 10, 11:30 service, we just keep that flow going throughout the week. And so it happens all throughout the day, throughout the night, because we understand that, well, those of us that might be in the US are asleep, there's people on the other side of the world that they're eating lunch. And so we've got to minister to them. So they run quite a bit throughout the week, but they are predetermined times that are going to be led by some amazing volunteers.
So even though the service is playback, you have live chat room people and live pastors standing by online to minister to people at that time, no matter what time of day it may air.
Yeah, that's it, man.
That's a powerful thing, really powerful thing. The last thing I'd probably just say is, what have you learned from all this? You've been doing this now for a long time. Has your thinking about the digital space changed when it comes to church? What would you say to people that anything surprising, in the last few years that have hit you? What's in your head right now?
There's probably things that are always surprising us every day. But if I were to answer your question, what are we learning? I think and I'm not trying to get too philosophical on you, but it's that we can really never outplan for what God wants to do. We were hopeful that there was ministry opportunities for us in 2006 through online ministry, but we had no clue that in 2020 that was going to be our primary tool that God was going to use. And so, if anything, I think we've probably learned that we have a mindset of that when God calls us to something, we've got to be all in, and we have no idea how He's going to use it one day to be a major source of influence to get His message of hope and the gospel across. And so, I would say that's our posture: is not only how can we lean into it, but then also how can we keep serving and equipping other churches to do the same.
I think the day is over to stop arguing about whether we should be doing digital ministry and just, and jump in there hands and feet and make this thing happen. I think it's here, and we've seen through the pandemic, people respond. I've seen some remarkable stories. I have a friend who pastors 900 people, and he called me to say 1.5 million people saw my Easter message online. And I'm thinking, he said, I almost don't want to go back in the building because we're having such success online. We're impacting our community more than we've ever done. So it's just interesting to see what's been happening out there. And I love what you guys are doing. And just know that there's so many people that follow you guys and look to you as an example. And I will say to the people watching and listening to this episode, Life.Church is different. They're the 10,000 pound elephant over here. They're gigantic and they do things a certain way. And if you're a 75 member church or 1,000 member church or a 500 member church, you may not adapt your online ministry in the same way. But there are overarching principles that I think, Jonathan's been talking about that are absolutely true. Making it an authentic experience that really connects with people is critical, no matter how you actually pull that off wherever you are. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for being a part of this. This was really, really fantastic, and appreciate you being open and honest.
Man, it was such an honor. And hopefully, like you said, I know that it might come across like we know what we're doing. And I think we have learned some things, but we are constantly learning. And if there's one thing I could encourage your listeners with is just assume that posture of learning, be open to where God's leading. And then when you sense the Holy Spirit moving, man, pour gasoline on that fire, lean into it, because there's something really special on the other side.
Jonathan, thank you so much for being a part of it. And we really appreciate what you're doing. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
That was a fantastic interview with Jonathan. And if you're thinking about digital stuff, particularly if you're at a church or a ministry or a nonprofit, I would encourage you to get my book, Maximize Your Influence, How to Make Digital Media Work for Your Church, Your Ministry, and You. You can get it at influencematters.com, or you can donate to our nonprofit to help people internationally use media more effectively to share the gospel, or you can get it on Amazon or other places where books are sold. I would encourage you to get it because this is really designed to be a reference, and it'll answer a lot of questions that we weren't able to cover today in the podcast. Maximize your influence. I'll tell you, it's time to stop arguing about whether we should be involved in digital media. The church should get out there full on and be a part of that conversation because it's happening right now globally, and it's a powerful way to share the gospel with today's culture.